Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 76. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Dave, a lot to talk about today. A lot of things coordinator related, but first, how you doing?
I'm feeling better these days. Got an appointment with a neurosurgeon a week from today, and right on cue, my back has been clearing up on me. It's like it's like your health knows these things when you have key appointments coming up. But I probably haven't felt this good since the end of August, and so keep your fingers crossed that continues.
You know, one guy that probably hasn't felt this good since about that time as well is Anthony Miller. Wide receiver Anthony Miller with a shoulder injury this summer was placed on IR, re-signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday to a one-year deal. And so a bit of veteran wide receiver depth, a guy that can play inside, can play outside. We had just talked about, I guess, on Friday show, I believe it was, that we didn't think this guy would come back. He'd probably just move on, but Pittsburgh deciding to kind of keep some veteran guys in-house. And, Miller's been a talented player when healthy and just had that nasty shoulder injury last year. So Anthony Miller, we'll see how far he gets, assuming he makes it to at least camp. Anything beyond that doesn't seem to be guaranteed, but Anthony Miller back to Pittsburgh on a one-year deal.
And we kind of said if it does happen, it would probably be a veteran benefit deal. And with this being announced as a one year deal, I'm betting that's what it's going to be. As I stated, man, he certainly looked rocked up last off season there around OTA times and all like that. I mean, if there was one guy on this roster, on the off season roster that really looked to be in. I mean, they all look in great condition. I mean, especially compared to me, but he really looked rocked up, and I think he was, seemed to be, I guess. When did he hurt the shoulder?
About mid-August, around there.
Okay. So it was after the start of training camp, but
yes.
Before preseason games and all. So how did you view it? I mean, did he stick out in training camp?
He had a nice start to camp. I was looking back at my notes about the first week or so, and then actually kind of began to fade, lose some reps as Pickens and others started to emerge, and then was hurt. But so it was a decent start that kind of began to fade. Then obviously it all ended very quickly.
Right. Well, we'll see if he can make the roster. I really think still the odds are kind of against him. The special teams value that he provides for this team would be more as a returner. And, obviously he's going to be on, near the bottom. I mean, he could give you something out of a slot. I think if you go back to his time with the Bears, I mean, it seems like his most productivity at the NFL level has been kind of slot, situation. This is a team that really could use some slot, help, wherever they can get it from in 2023. So, they got him back under contract for a one-year deal. Now we'll see if he can hang on throughout the rest of the summer.
Right. Obviously, this move does not preclude this team from adding receivers at any other step in the offseason, be it free agency or the draft. Just a veteran guy there in the back end that can play inside out and has some NFL experience, which is going to be valuable to a room that's pretty young right now. So that is the latest on Anthony Miller. Switching over to the Steelers coaching staff, Brian Flores still a Steeler for now. And one place we know he won't be going to is Cleveland. The Browns, despite Flores interviewing for their defensive coordinator position, they have hired Jim Schwartz. That move came out on Tuesday morning. And so Flores still in the mix. We at least believe so for the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job. And actually there's been momentum kind of signaling Flores could be a favorite there. Also, the Atlanta Falcons putting in a request to interview him for their DC vacancy, but we know that at least Flores will not defect to Cleveland.
Yeah, but I tell you that news about the new general manager and Monty Ossenfort with the Cardinals, that really got my attention, Alex, because you start digging through the history of both Brian Flores and Ossenfort. Those guys spent a lot of time together in New England. They came up through the scouting department together. I think Flores even he did mention Ossenfort when running down some things back when he was, I think it was close to the end of his tenure with the Miami Dolphins as their head coach. I think they were preparing to play, I think, the Patriots at the time, and just talking about, their people that come out of that organization and all like that. And look, I mean, these guys spent a lot of time with each other with the Patriots. So, and coming up through the scouting department, like I said, so these two know each other, and at this point, I mean, and look, I mean, I would think that obviously Flores would want to be returned to the head coaching ranks, before being a defensive coordinator. Wouldn't want to settle for a defensive coordinator job if you really thought there was a chance to get, to make a run at a head coaching job. I think this is a little bit of a game changer here. So it's going to be, I think, most interesting to watch how this head coaching search for the Cardinals turns out. And once again, the main reason behind that is just the strong link history between Monty Ossenfort and Brian Flores in New England.
Right. And if you're into the betting odds world, Flores' odds really went up and became a co-favorite at one point after that GM hire was made. Now there's Sean Payton out there, and I think Arizona, everyone's trying to land Sean Payton if they can. And there's some reason to believe why Payton would have interest in going to Arizona. He seemed to like Kyler Murray coming out, for whatever it's worth. And, this all gets complicated and in the weeds. I know that some of the people in Brian Flores' lawsuit are suing the Cardinals, like Steve Wilkes, like Ray Horton. And so would Flores go to Arizona, who's, being part of that suit against them? We can talk about that for a long time, I'm sure. But it's certainly a lot of connections there that as you said, kind of raises the antenna on Flores potentially going to Arizona. But right now we know that at least he won't go to Cleveland, and we'll just kind of take that day by day.
Yeah, Jim Schwartz back there, boy, he's been around the league for a little while, and he usually puts together some pretty stout defenses, if memory serves me and all. So, but once again, with the All-Star games coming up, and teams are going to want these head coaching vacancies filled, as soon as possible. And I guess technically we've got about 2 more weeks or so before the All-Star games start getting up and running. So true or false, we'll have our answer to Flores leaving or staying by February 1st.
Oh yeah, definitely by then. I think maybe even by close to week's end, because I think the dominoes will start to fall pretty quickly. Again, I think Sean Payton is like Aaron Rodgers last year, where the whole quarterback carousel didn't begin until Rodgers made his decision to return to Green Bay. And then all the other wheels got set in motion. I think everyone's trying to pine for Payton right now. If he even goes to a team, he could just sit there and say, I don't like any of these offers. I'm going to sit back and wait. You got Carolina, you got Arizona, Houston, potentially. They're all showing a lot of interest in him. So until I think Payton decides what he wants to do, everything else is kind of on hold. And then once that domino falls, I think those wheels will get put into motion pretty quickly around the NFL.
Yeah. Do you think it would behoove, is it a right situation for Flores when it comes to a defensive coordinator job? In other words, do you think he'd pretty much take any defensive coordinator job at this point? Or do you think it's got to be the right one for him? Or do you think he might say, "Nah, I'm good for 1 more year. Let me let me work on my stock a little bit more here"?
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure what's in his head. My mentality for these coaches is, if you have an opportunity, take it, because you don't know if you'll get that same opportunity next year. We can talk about Byron Leftwich. It's seemingly about to be fired, not official, but reported that Leftwich will be fired by the Buccaneers as their OC. 1 year ago, Leftwich was one of the hottest names for head coaching jobs. I mean, he was always about to go to Jacksonville, and that fell through. He had issues with the GM, Trent Baalke. that whole story played out. And now he's, totally fallen out of favor. So I think when these guys assume that job will open up next year, there is no guarantee of that. So I think if Flores gets an offer, just my assumption, my guess, they said he'll take it no matter what it is.
Now, I know the Steelers wouldn't get any compensation for Flores leaving, but do the Cardinals benefit by a minority head coach hire here in a draft pick compensation?
No, the team that hires gets no compensation. It's a team that loses that would get compensation. But in Flores' case, because he's not been here for 2 years, he would not get it, even if he became the Cardinals head coach.
Okay. I was more focused now on the point of would the Cardinals benefit in any way of some sort of pick? I can't remember.
No, to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
So we'll let you know about Flores there. Big news of the day yesterday. It is now Wednesday. Matt Canada is still the OC, and the typical timeline would strongly suggest that means that Matt Canada is staying. But for what it's worth, a report came out from The Athletic on Tuesday that apparently Mike Tomlin has been dealing with a personal issue, and basically all the player exit interviews, all the coaching decisions have been put on hold. Now, that does not necessarily mean that Canada will be fired. It just sounds like apparently it hasn't been discussed much, if at all, and no decisions have been made. And so this timeline could be unusually extended because of Tomlin's personal circumstances that I guess, would still make the point that Canada's status is still up in the air.
All that minutia aside, and we don't know how much of that is true, it isn't true, and what the real behind the doors time frame is at this point, other than that report on Tuesday there. I'll tell you this, Kenny Pickett sure sounded like in that interview with Cam Heyward on his podcast that if Matt Canada's not going to be the OC in 2023, that would be news to him right now.
Yeah, and that was a recent recording because they were referencing some of the wild card action, and so that's not like it was taped, 2 weeks ago, just for the context of it. We'll see. I guess it's up in the air.
He could be the last one to know. It's not like they are obligated to keep the players in the loop here. When it comes to this.
I mean, if it hadn't been discussed by the coaching staff, then Kennedy's just going to proceed under the assumption for now until told otherwise that Canada is the OC. And that's basically the approach I'll take right now. Is I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'll proceed with the assumption that Canada is the OC until he's fired, until he's not, until told otherwise is going to be my approach right now. I know that, I saw some people, I think I saw one Pittsburgh columnist today saying that, Pickett seemed to really be banging the table to keep Canada around. I didn't get that sense in the comments that Pickett made on Heyward's podcast, but again, I'll just proceed that Canada's the guy until he's not.
I mean, what is he supposed to say on about Canada when asked directly about him on a podcast like that? Yeah, well, obviously you're going to say good things when it comes to that stuff, but I just when listening to it and listening to the context, and once again, he might be the last one in the building that knows about it. And that very well could be the case here. I just kind of yesterday got the overwhelming feeling that there's not going to be there's definitely not going to be a change now. Not that there couldn't be, because the whole, timing thing and the Tomlin personal matter, and maybe some of that's been put on the back burner and all like that. Maybe lo and behold, we'll get halfway through this show and they come out with an announcement. But the things that I think we've established at this fact are what? Matt Canada's under contract through 2023. We're pretty sure about that after, I think, 2 reports by ESPN. I think Dulac was the other one there. So within that, if they were going to make a change at this point, it would be a firing or a retire. Still kidding. I'm always not. That statement is always going to stick in my head. A firing or a retiring. And not a didn't renew the contract situation, as was the case, most recently with Randy Fichtner and Todd Haley.
Right. And so we know in Pittsburgh, they do not fire coordinators. It just does not happen. Not that it can't happen, but historically, you got to go back 20 years to find the last coordinator fired after a season. Just to kind of expand on what I was kind of getting at, Cam Heyward asked Kenny Pickett, talk about your relationship with Mike Tomlin and Matt Canada.
Mhm.
And he started with Pickett started with Tomlin and went on this long 2-minute, just, glowing review about Tomlin. I'd go to war for this guy. I love this guy. He's helped me so much. I love picking his brain. Then he talked about Canada for about 15 seconds and just said, "Hey, he recruited me. It's been good." I mean, he said nothing bad, but he didn't go on this long monologue about Canada the way that he did Tomlin. So to me, nothing that Pickett said, really was him advocating so strongly to keep Canada. I'm sure he's fine if he stays, if he goes, it's whatever. But I thought some of the local media guys are probably making too much out of those comments that Pickett had, at least about whether or not he would want Canada back.
Yeah, but within that though, I mean, there were still some nice comments that he had about Canada listening to him and second half of the season, and I mean, it wasn't anything probably not expected, but it wasn't.
Right, but again, it goes back to what did you expect the guy to say?
Service it, right? But I don't think I didn't get the feeling that he just lip serviced it either.
No, I kind of felt like he kind of did. Okay. That was my view of it. But regardless,
maybe you have some anti-Canada bias working in your head.
No, I said for a while I don't care which
way this goes at this point. Other than, I'll tell you this: this team needs to score more points. They need more explosive plays. They need all the things that we talked about all throughout last season. So and I think I left off that I was 51%. In the corner of thinking that Canada would be back. I'm bumping mine up to about 62% now.
Yeah, I've been kind of in that direction. More likely than not, he's staying, even as some of the local beat writers were pretty confident he was getting fired. And again, we'll have to see. You can't, nothing's been announced by the team yet, and there's been no official report. And again, the reporting yesterday said that no decision's been made, but I'm of the mindset that Canada, whether you like it or not, and I know most people will not like it, I'm of the mindset that Canada will be back next year.
Well, here's the thing too, that I'm, that's in my head now. Just man, let's get past this one way or the other. Either let's find out if he's not going to be back, and then see who the new offensive coordinator is going to be, or let's find out that he's all the daily bitching about it, is just nauseating at this point,
Sure.
If he stays, is there going to be just incessant complaining I mean,
yes.
Move on. I mean, the answer is yes, but I mean, nothing anybody says or does, complaining about it's going to change it,
Sure.
I think that's one of the hardest parts about this is just seeing people go on and on and on and on. We get it. We understand. We have talked about it. Probably if we both had our druthers, they would move on. But the fact of the matter is that it's really starting to look more and more like he's going to be around through 2023 at the least.
Right. And obviously you respect whatever Tomlin has happening in his personal life, and, he needs to take care of that first. But at some point, this team will have to make a decision, probably by week's end, you would think, just because with the Senior Bowl coming up and with other teams, I know that no head coaches have been really hired yet, but that's going to happen pretty quickly. Their staffs are going to get put together. Those wheels will be put in motion pretty soon. And so, I imagine this team's going to have to make that decision on its coaching staff by week's end, I would say.
I mean, there's like 6 offensive coordinator jobs around the league open now, right? And a potential 7th one with the Buccaneers. How much do you buy into they're waiting to see what happens with Byron Leftwich rumor going around?
Yeah, I never really bought into that. And if we take
feels manufactured to me, but
it does. And if you take the report that Tomlin just hasn't made that decision because of a personal issue that hasn't given him the time to make those decisions, then that throws cold water on the idea they're waiting for Leftwich. Now, Leftwich appears to be on the outs in Tampa Bay, so I guess we'll probably get a sense of how true that quote-unquote report or rumor is, because it sounds like Leftwich will be fired. Has not happened yet, not guaranteed to happen, but appears to be trending that way. On a personal level, I mean, I'm no, Canada fan, but I'm not swapping Canada for Byron Leftwich, who, was just as criticized and just as justifiably criticized as Canada was this year for the very conservative offense they ran down in Tampa Bay.
I mean, does it feel like the right process? We talk about process a lot of times. Does it feel like the right process? Well, we'll stick with Canada unless this guy,
that's not how the Steelers typically operate.
It all, and look, we'll see if it plays out with, okay, Byron Leftwich is available. See you, Matt. We're going to bring in Leftwich. We'll see if it plays out that way. But it just, that whole thing feels manufactured to me, and has, right from the start a few days ago.
Yeah, I don't really buy it. I mean, we'll see. Again, I think we'll probably be able to get an answer to that, because it sounds like Leftwich is going to be gone, and so that'll address how true that rumor is. But I don't buy it right now.
I really think the process, what ends up happening with Leftwich, would be that if he is fired, that he ends up as a quarterback's coach, goes back for, goes backwards first before he goes back to be an offensive coordinator. However, what was it, about a year and a half or so ago, he was the hottest up and coming head coach prospect. And now, time moves fast.
Right. And that's where I look at, and this is an aside, but I look at a Ben Johnson who's staying in Detroit, and hey, credit to him to turn down opportunities to become a head coach somewhere and stay in Detroit with Dan Campbell. That's a sense of loyalty that you don't see often in any facet of the world, but especially in the sports world. But they got to strike while the iron's hot, and you worry about if things go awry in Detroit next year, do you miss your opportunity? So, I think the guys have to jump on opportunities when they can. That kind of goes back to Flores, where if he gets a chance to go somewhere, you have to take it.
All right, it is now Wednesday. Will we have some finality by Friday at 5 p.m., one way or the other?
Well, the issue I have with that is if Canada stays, they probably won't tell you. They'll just not announce anything. And so how will we know officially if he's staying? We probably wouldn't get
something. Would leak out something, wouldn't it?
Has it before? I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Or would we have to wait for the Rooney bat signal to go up at the end of the end of the month, and then him say that he be asked point blank if he's staying, and then get the answer that way?
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. And of course, if Canada's still the OC by late January, that already tells you he's staying. So, if he's fired, I think it'll happen by week's end, although we don't know the exact nature of the personal issue that Tomlin apparently is dealing with and how that affects the timeline. So again, for me, I'm just working under the assumption that Canada is back until I am told otherwise.
Okay.
One other piece of coaching news. Mike Tomlin, not known for his coaching tree, but there might be some roots planted here with Grady Brown, who's going to be the DC for the national team for the Senior Bowl. And so the Senior Bowl kind of changing up the way that they have coaching staffs. Used to be just teams, full staffs of, say, the Steelers and the Titans would have their coaching staffs down there, just making up names there. Now it's going to be just individual coaches picked. And so Grady Brown, the Steelers defensive backs coach, who most people might not know, will be the DC for the Senior Bowl, which is going to be good for Pittsburgh to be able to have a guy that works super closely with some of those prospects. And then really just seems like a nod to, Grady Brown getting some recognition around the league. Kind of a young guy, spent a lot of time in college, 2 years in the NFL. Could he become an eventual coordinator somewhere? That seems possible. And so that's something to look for on the horizon.
Yeah. How many interceptions do they have this past season?
20.
Yeah, I mean, that'll get you attention, won't it?
Yep.
Riddle me this, Batman.
I'm definitely a Robin.
Are you a Robin?
Yeah,
that makes me Batman then, right?
That makes you Batman. That seems more like
I'm the Joker, probably.
That's also true. Okay.
Down at the Senior Bowl, do you get any access to any of the coaches?
Some of the head coaches will talk. Actually, they do talk on media day. Not the assistants, to my knowledge, but the head coaches speak.
So you don't think there'll be an opportunity to maybe pull Grady aside?
I don't think so. Probably not, unfortunately.
Be interesting if you could, but that was just that's been in my head since it was announced to ask you about.
Yeah, but we'll be watching him down there and see his interaction with the players, and again, that's always good for the team, and just kind of as a nod to Brown getting some acknowledgement from the NFL that this is a guy maybe on the rise. And he was a total unknown when Pittsburgh hired him. I mean, he had just taken the Houston job, literally, and it's just the Houston college football job, 5 days before Pittsburgh decided to hire him as a defensive backs coach, kind of assistant to Terrell Austin at the time. Then Brown became really the guy once Austin became DC this year. So, players have really credited him well. He knows the college game well. So there's probably still relationships that he has with some of those guys who'll be coaching. Really interesting to see.
Did you get into comics much as a kid or no?
Nah, never been much of a comics guy. Sounds like you have a little bit.
I mean, I was, at kind of, I guess, kind of early stage there. I was more of a Marvel guy, like Cam Heyward. However, Batman. I mean, you had the Super Friends and all like that on TV, and read some Batman and that line. But I was more of a Marvel, Spider-Man, that kind of stuff there. But
right.
not for a long period of time. I had I don't know, probably needed money and sold them off at one point. For
today, are you still kind of in that stuff today? Or
no. I ain't got time. I mean,
well, just like the Marvel universe, not even comics.
Yeah.
But just,
I like some of the movies that Birds of the Prey that I talked about, Margot Robbie and all that series, those movies. I like those. I haven't been keeping up with they make a movie about any of them now, it seems like now, but some of the major ones I'll pay attention to and all like that. But as far as reading comics and staying up to date and all like that, no, I look, it's football for me and war documentaries during the off season.
There you go. All right, bringing it back to Pittsburgh here. This has been going around on Twitter for, I don't know, a week or two now, and a lot of it just the Twitter games that you and I aren't too super keen on talking about. But Taylor Lewan kind of made it hard to ignore yesterday. Lewan, the offensive tackle for the Titans, there's been some, I don't know what you want to call it, pushes to get Lewan to come to Pittsburgh, the jersey swaps, that whole Twitter world, and Lewan responding to one jersey swap of him wearing black and gold, saying something like that uniform goes hard. And so Lewan expected to be released this offseason by the Titans after a long list of injuries. That'll be a conversation about, could Lewan come to Pittsburgh?
I think, and two, Jersey Jerry and Taylor Lewan, both of them in the Lewan podcast, kind of part of the Barstool. And they got so many podcasts.
I think they're both, they work for Barstool.
Okay. I don't know how contrived that might be, but I'll tell you this, Taylor Lewan has been up front getting out ahead of this and saying that he expects to be cut by the Titans this offseason, and that's not unthinkable. Two serious knee injuries in the last 3 seasons. He's got a hefty base salary due to him in 2023 of nearly $15 million. He's on the wrong side of 30, as you would say. Although, how does Jason Peters keep playing at 40 years old? That got me the other night. However, he did leave that game, I think, with a hip injury or something like that. But age and injury history with Lewan and salary, he's going to be a street free agent by March 15th. I think he's pretty convinced of that. So that's why he's kind of getting out ahead of this, and good for him. Get your name out circulating in the market, and him commenting on those colors of the Steelers. And why wouldn't he say something like that, right? Get those irons in the fire out there early, way before you're even released at this point. Now, the plausibility factor here,
pretty low to me.
I would think is pretty low too. Now, once again, the age, the injury history,
price,
the potential price, and then when you look at the players that are the tackles that are set to be unrestricted free agents, and we all know how that group kind of grows through players getting cut here in the next several weeks and all like that. It's not all that attractive. And Orlando, what's his name? Brown.
Yeah.
he might end up being franchised,
Right.
So that and what's going to happen with Maglitshy in the 40, that might be another one. So you could get to a situation here in the next, 4 weeks from now where Taylor Lewan doesn't look that bad, for a team might maybe want to add a veteran tackle at a half price, if you will. So I think when you look at this, like we look at it very objectively, it's not impossible, obviously, because they could make anything work from a salary standpoint if they wanted to. I will be very surprised if Taylor Lewan ends up in an actual Pittsburgh Steelers jersey this offseason. You got to be careful because you got to be careful speaking in absolutes because we see these things, but just all the signs when you look at him in a situation in the market and yada yada. Once again, I'll be surprised if he ends up with the Steelers.
When I say price, it doesn't mean that Pittsburgh couldn't afford him. They absolutely could if they wanted to, but how much are you going to pay for a soon-to-be 32-year-old tackle that played 2 games this year, 13 games last year, 5 games in 2020, 12 games in 2019, et cetera? Just been hampered by so many injuries, both big and small. You have Dan Moore, who's progressed. Not impossible, as you said. I don't want to completely rule it out, but it just doesn't seem likely just based on Lewan's history.
Right. This is welcome to the silly season where this won't be the first situation like this where, we're discussing jersey swaps and potential guys and all like that,
Yeah, Lewan may want to come to Pittsburgh, but will Pittsburgh want to bring in Lewan? To me, the jersey swap is as close as he'll get to playing for the Steelers. But as you said, you can't say 100% no. There are some things that you understand why that would fit. Is he a better player right now than Dan Moore? Maybe when they're both 100% healthy, sure, but there's the health aspect. There's the continuity aspect this team will want to have with its offensive line that certainly grew and got better. Resources better put with its defensive line or other positions. Let's first see if Lewan gets released. We assume that'll happen, but that's got to happen first. Then we'll see who else is available and take it from there.
Isn't he the one that at one time said Myles Garrett was a better pass rusher than TJ Watt or something?
I know he's had a lot of controversy.
At the very least, it would set up for some interesting training camp battles.
Yeah, he's a nasty dude. Like Lewan was definitely the guy that gets after it.
Yeah, I could foresee some skirmishes, some brouhahas.
That's a very old school term there. But yeah, I just think with the injury history alone, just not enough there to really make it worth it. But it's something that certainly caught Twitter's attention yesterday, and so we wanted to mention that to you guys. Right. Did they have interest in Lewan coming out back in 2014? He was a higher pick.
Wasn't he a Michigan guy too? Wasn't he?
Yeah, there's a Talo, Michigan, man. So I guess just on that alone, probably. But I don't know if there was actually anything.
We would have
a visit or a pro day.
We would have to look through the database, which I'm assuming you're probably doing right now.
I am. I'm not seeing Lewan as a pre-draft visitor. I just assume they were at the Michigan Pro Day because they're usually at the Michigan Pro Day. Tomlin is, but I don't know that as a fact right now.
All right.
Anyway, Kenny Pickett, as you mentioned earlier, was on Cam Heyward's podcast that went up yesterday. Nothing earth-shattering that he said. Had a lot of praise, obviously, for Tomlin. Talked about Canada a bit. Some of the comments that we discussed. Talked about George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, Connor Heyward. Anything? What was the most notable thing that Pickett said in your mind on that podcast?
Big Jordan Addison fan, Kenny Pickett is. I wonder why that is there. And you go back to March of 2022. He had that what's that guy's name? Adam Brenneman. And I think he's a former Pitt player.
I believe so
as well too. Had Kenny on his I guess you call that a video cast back pre-draft March of 2022, and Kenny said he'd be banging the table for whatever team winds up drafting him to draft Addison come that time. And then fast forward to the Cam Heyward interview on the podcast yesterday and all. And once again, the praise for Jordan Addison. And I don't know about some of those numbers he threw out in the 40. Well, really think Jordan Addison going to run sub 4.3 or even low 4.3?
I just started my tape study to profile him last night. No, Addison is not a 4.2 or even a 4.3 guy.
Yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts on it. Very talented guy. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, he's and with good reason, more than likely going to be a first round pick. I think the question obviously is where in the first round. Is it? And I think predominantly he played in the slot during his college career. He's a very versatile guy, I think, overall. And Lord knows, we've already said a few times since the season, this team could use some slot help. How plausible is it if a guy like Jordan Addison were on the board? And because we don't know, all these things change. It's middle of January. People have guys slotted here. They could go later. They could go earlier, all those kind of things. So let's throw out there the first two picks the Steelers have, 17th and 32nd overall. How plausible is it that they draft Jordan Addison if he's there, either one of those two picks? In other words, is it unthinkable that this team drafts another wide receiver with one of their first two picks, and specifically Jordan Addison, I guess, is the better question there.
Yeah, the position is where I struggle a little bit. I think they'll like Addison. They know him. He's a slot guy. He fits. Pickett will want him. There's a lot of reasons that in a vacuum for this team to be interested in Jordan Addison. I assume they will be. Will you draft a receiver with a first-round pick or almost, by default, de facto first-round pick with other needs? That's where you kind of start to wonder about that based on Weidl's approach of building through the trenches, the need this team has in the trenches. Again, how they fill things in for agency prior to that point can certainly impact needs and what you value and what you're looking for. But I struggle with that a little bit. But no question in my mind that they're going to have interest in Jordan Addison.
I agree. And whatever level of plausibility you just gave that, I'm going to overbid you by $1.
You price is right in me.
Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with who is Calvin Austin III, that's a big question mark right now. Well, we kind of know who Anthony Miller is. Look, once again, this team needs slot help. I'm not advocating anything here. I'm just saying that it would be an interesting decision to have to make if he were on the board with one of those two picks, and he's staring you in the face.
Right, because he plays in the slot. He fits what you need right now. This team doesn't have any proven guys in the slot. Sims, Olszewski, they're not anything outside of really return guys. They were forced into that role last year. Austin, you hope you can get something out of him, but with a foot injury, you're not quite sure. And even if you had, Austin and Addison, you're 4 deep at receiver to protect yourself versus injury and rotate guys, and they have different skill sets. Austin and Addison aren't the same player. They're going to win in different ways. And so there's a way to have all those guys have roles on this offense. So it wouldn't necessarily, prevent you from playing Austin at all or anything like that. Still watching Addison in my own tape study. I'll have a profile on him by week's end.
All right.
But I can certainly see the intrigue there that Pittsburgh would have in him.
Right.
Anything else from Pickett? I think the rest of it, I thought some of the comments that he made about, improving his off-platform throws, kind of being able to extend the play, watching Josh Allen, watching Patrick Mahomes, getting better at, making those off-schedule type moments. And it was kind of an interesting comment that Pickett made about what he'll be trying to take away as he watches the rest of the playoffs.
And look, we got to see a few of those late in the season there. And man, when you go back and you rewind just this past weekend and see some of the things some of these quarterbacks did, Dak Prescott, just really had a solid game doing some of those things, and as we've said time and time again, in today's NFL, you've got to be able to play out a structure.
Yeah, to a degree, at least. I wrote the article yesterday, said that, 80% of quarterback play is foundational. It's inside structure. It's inside the pocket. The other 20% is where the magic happens. That's where you become a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or one of those top tier guys that can separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And Pickett's never going to exactly be Mahomes or Josh Allen, but it was encouraging to see him be able to extend the play and scramble and throw off platform to his left and to his right. And those will be things he'll have to do if he wants to really become that eventual next tier, top 10-ish type of quarterback.
Some credit to Brian Flores as part of that interview, right?
Right. Talked about 2-minute drills and back in training camp, how I believe Flores' advice essentially was, during a 2-minute drill, you got to take, one good chunk play, and then you can kind of check down and take what the defense gives you the rest of the way before you take your shot to the end zone. And that was kind of what happened, I guess, against the Ravens on that throw to Steven Sims, and maybe to a lesser extent against the Raiders because it was a bit more check down heavy, but there was that one nice throw to Pat Frymuth on the move out of structure, off platform type play there. And then eventually you take what the defense gives you. So yeah, that's the value of having really smart, good coaches like Flores, where they help your defense, obviously, but they can help your offense just as much.
All right. And a little bit of praise for Connor Heyward as well, too. And kind of an interesting quote within all that.
Yeah, at the very end, praised Heyward up and down for the job he did, the versatility, but kind of made a reference to getting him in the backfield more. And, I think for Heyward, the value with him is within his versatility. And so the more that he can do, the better. If Derek Watt leaves, that could potentially open up different roles and different alignments for Connor Heyward. So a lot of praise there. And the guy they call Meatball, Cam Heyward calls him Meatball, which I don't know, he looks like a meatball. I guess he kind of has that vibe.
Yeah, I think it kind of fits, Look, I had a terrible take about this not too terribly long since the season ended. Kind of knew what we were getting with Connor Heyward coming out and all, but I think he exceeded that. Man, you go all the way back to camp in the preseason, those hands of his, really, really sticky hands. He's got a very nice catch radius, especially for a guy his size. If this guy was 6 foot, 3.5, 6'4", he would be a lot more marketable as an all-around tight end because you could, attach him to the line of scrimmage probably more at that point there. But within all that, Saul, split zone stuff and moving across the formation and getting some of those cut blocks done. I thought he improved in that aspect. He's a guy that I think you can throw out there for 200 special team snaps and get production that way as well too. So, what we learned about Cameron Heyward in his 2022 rookie season, I think, is that he's going to be around the NFL for a little while.
It's probably a good thing that Heyward isn't 6'3", because if he was, he wouldn't have been in the 6th round. He probably isn't a Steeler right now because he got knocked for the lack of size and the tweener aspect and where you play him. But what Pickett said was, and we had this thought whenever they drafted him in our pre-draft evaluation, whatever you want to call Connor Heyward, tight end, fullback, H-back, slot receiver, dude's a football player. Dude just makes plays. You line him up, you tell him his job, and he gets the job done. He really kind of grew, as you said, as a blocker, as a receiver, as a runner occasionally, sealing the Raiders game, 2 carries, 2 first downs for 27 yards. This guy just makes plays. He did it in Michigan State. He's doing it now in Pittsburgh.
Right.
So that probably is the ball from Kenny Pickett. Good conversation there. Yeah, that Heyward podcast, it's pretty solid. I think it's always pretty entertaining.
I think he's getting better as time goes along. He was obviously on the NFL Network this past weekend and makes appearances on there. You probably see him on there moving on through the off season and around combine time and all like that. Cam's definitely got a future in that stuff after football and a lot of people probably, when the Steelers aren't doing good, they don't like anybody having shows or podcasts or anything along those lines. And that's got to be tough to juggle, I would imagine. But I think the Ben Roethlisberger podcast is good too. The only thing about that is I can't drink anymore. So all the, all the beer and alcohol taste and all like that, none of that interests me. But I'm also a minority in that realm too. I understand the premise of what they're trying to do there, but when they actually talk football and all like that, and have guests on, I think they're doing a good job. But I think that interview with Pickett that Cam had was a very good one.
I think Cam has definitely gotten better, but to kind of your point, it's probably gotten better because the team wasn't 2-6 anymore, and they weren't just
Right.
talking about getting their teeth kicked in. They were, having success, and the season's over, and it's kind of a lot more fun and laid back than talking about, why you lost by 30 points. Yeah, I know that Ben has what his live show, I guess, in just about a week. He's got Kutch on. Andrew McCutcheon is going to be a guest. That's going to be kind of cool.
Wow.
Just from a general Pittsburgh sports standpoint.
All
right. That probably wraps up Kenny Pickett. That was all that I had to talk about today. Dave, anything else that you wanted to make mention of? One last thing. I had my first NFL draft player profile go up today. Speaking of receivers, on Zay Flowers, the receiver from Boston College. And, I might be a little bit lower on him than some others. I know that he's gotten first round buzz, and he may very well go there. I like his tape a lot. He's kind of my kind of guy, the shorter, explosive guy that separates, creates space. You just worry about how much value and how much stock you put into a guy that's 5'10", if that, $170, that may not have that elite burner type speed. Is he really going to be a focal point of your offense, and how do you value that? But I wanted to jump on him first because I think that's the guy that Pittsburgh is definitely going to have interest in this draft process, for the slot value, for the receiver run game type stuff. And, we love playing the Blues Clues in the connection game here. Dino Tomlin transferred to Boston College. Tomlin went up to one of those games this year where Flowers had a big contest, big performance against Rutgers. And so there's just a lot of tea leaves there that leads me to believe that Zay Flowers will be on Pittsburgh's radar.
Where do you come down on him as far as grade and potential round from, and obviously you're just scratching the surface in all this.
Yeah, again, I think he probably will go higher than what I had him graded out as kind of a third round pick, just because if you're like 5'9.5", 5'10", $175-ish, and you don't have that elite four, like he's a fast guy, there's no question, but is he a 4.3, Calvin Austin type guy? I don't know if I quite saw that. And so what is the ceiling in terms of your role for the offense? Are you going to be really a true X receiver or like a high volume kind of guy that justifies that pick? I don't know. And so I kind of was dinging him for that, but the tape is a lot of fun. He's a talented player, a really good guy, it seems like. And it would not be, a bad acquisition for this team.
Now, see, he's a Senior Bowl guy, isn't he?
No, I think he got an invite. He's going Shrine Bowl. He's going out your way. Yeah. Shrine Bowl guy.
All right. That's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, the Senior Bowl apparently wanted him. He just chose the Shrine Bowl, apparently.
Interesting decision there.
Yeah. So you guys, I wanted to talk to him. I thought for sure he'd be a Senior Bowl guy. I looked him up. I went, dang, he's going out. Go. So you go talk to him. You go talk to Zay Flowers. But
we'll have our people, the 5 that we have coming out here. I'm sure at some point we'll get a chance to sit down with him.
Yeah, and what's interesting about him is just some of the off-the-field character stuff. I mean, this guy had the opportunity to take a big NIL deal. It was reported just in the way that Jordan Addison did, leaving Pitt to go to USC, and Flowers turned it down and stayed in Boston College. And you don't see that stuff too often. I think Pittsburgh will like that. Dude is one of 13 children. Big family. He's actually the 4th oldest. That's why he wears number 4. Yeah, very much a high character guy, it seems like. So I think we'll check all those boxes for Pittsburgh. And again, Tomlin went up to that game, the first game of the year, I think it was in early September, because Pittsburgh was where the 4th preseason game would be, no longer there. There was kind of that mini bye. And so Tomlin went to that game to go see his son, obviously, but Zay Flowers had 10 catches and 2 touchdowns in that game. I guarantee you Tomlin saw that and that caught his attention. And so that's going to probably be something that sticks with Mike Tomlin.
All right. Who do you, we're starting to put together these, kind of real, in-depth, sheets for, these all-star games and all like that. And got the Senior Bowl sheet kind of cobbled together, late last night and all, and you probably haven't had a chance to go through it, meticulously. And, I've just kind of done the surface work on it myself. Who, throw out a couple of names that you're really interested that kind of have you intrigued of seeing down there in Mobile.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have any good answers for you right now. I'm just so new. I'm just kind of going through some of the guys I wanted to hit initially, which was Flowers and Addison. So this time next week, I should have a better answer for you, but I just really have to kind of go through the list myself.
Okay.
All right, Dave, anything else you want to talk about, or do you want to get to reader emails and close out today's show?
All right, I guess we can power through some emails here. Let me sort it real quick here. Joseph Thomas writes in, first time emailer. I just started listening last year and I love the content. I have a Hall of Fame question. You guys are very honest about Hines Ward's shot. And and while I do not disagree, it made me wonder about some other players. One of the main arguments that he says that I have heard you guys make against Ward is that he was never the guy in the league, meaning he was never a top 2 or 3 receiver. Again, I agree, but where does that leave a guy like Cam Heyward? He is not the best to do it at his position in his era, but I think he will find his way to Canton one day. Do you guys think he has a shot? Even Big Ben was never the best at his position in his era, but he arguably a first ballot guy. I do not necessarily disagree that Hines Ward will not make it to Canton, but I think it has more to do with position group than he has never been the guy. Is that fair to say? I mean, it's a different, I mean, it's a logical way, Joseph, that you have laid this out here. For starters, wide receivers is such a more higher profile, the skill positions, the ones that put up the touchdowns and the catches and all like that. Make it more, and it makes the log jam a lot deeper too, where we currently sit in this thing. And the fact of the matter is the eras and all like that. I mean, we've kind of have graduated from the Hines Ward era now, and there's still a log jam from that era that you would think would potentially get in before Hines Ward's strongly considered. And then as that process takes place, you're going to have some of these guys from the kind of the era past him start to get in line as well too. I think that compounds the problem when it comes to Ward specifically. I mean, throwing out Cam Heyward, that's obviously going to be a very interesting discussion. And concerning within that is the fact that he didn't get another Pro Bowl this year, and he didn't get an All-Pro nomination here. And how many years does Cam Heyward have left? I mean, if Cam Heyward was to walk away from the game right now, Alex, is he a slam dunk Hall of Famer?
No, not slam dunk, not even close to slam dunk.
So what does that mean? What does it mean?
It means he's got a ways to go. And yeah, I think, and I know sometimes people will laugh at, especially Pro Bowl, it's all silly, it's arbitrary, no one should care, but it matters a lot to these guys, especially when we look at Hall of Fame resumes, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And for Heyward to miss out on both Pro Bowl. Now, I guess you technically get credit if you become the alternate and get called up, quote unquote, to the Pro Bowl. Do you still get credit for that on your resume?
Yeah,
I think you do.
I believe you do. I think it still goes in your bio there, but how closely is that looked at by the voters? We don't know.
Well, my point is, they won't care about if you were an alternate and called up 10 years from now. They'll see Pro Bowl as another number on there. So that'll be a good thing. So we root for that. If Super Bowl, if injury creates an opportunity there for Heyward, but missing out on the All-Pro certainly hurts. Just to clarify, or at least I think for both of us, at least for me, is we're not saying you have to be number one at your position every single year, but you got to be one of those top guys, top 3, top 4. Ben was for a long stretch. And of course, quarterbacks always judged by Super Bowls, and he's got, 2 of those. For Heyward, to me, I think he's, for a time, has basically been a top 2, top 3 defensive tackle right behind, of course, Aaron Donald. And so I think Heyward's been in that category. It just, because his career got started later, didn't start until his 3rd year, didn't get the Pro Bowl recognition because he was a DN listed initially and was competing with actual edge rushers.
Right. That's a good point.
Hurt him. So it was just such a late, a little James Harrison, where things kind of got rolling a bit later in his career, not as extreme as Debo, obviously. I think Heyward will be close. He'll be in the conversation. He'll have to really be productive the next 2-3 years, but it's still going to be an upward climb for Cam Heyward.
I mean, look, you string together a couple more 10-sack seasons, especially some of that tape that he's. I mean, that long arm and that bull rush, man. And another thing that doesn't get talked about enough either is the pass bat downs, man. Especially when guys up front like that, and not that it's the entire package at all, but I mean, when you do put the entire package together, when you talk about Cam Heyward's tape, I mean, there was nothing, all that. I mean, there were a couple games early on in the season where he didn't have the production to get some guys that you probably thought maybe he should, but they were also able to kind of heavily scheme up on him on top of that too, right? And quarterbacks getting the ball out quicker. I didn't find anything overly concerning about Cam Heyward's 2022 season, at all. And I think Cam still has at least one, and that was his third double digit. That's when you get the attention, is when you hit that double digit number in a year, and that was his third. I mean, can he have, two more double digit numbers, and can he get, at least one more first team All-Pro in there?
Yeah, I think what matters is just the overall resume. It's less about double-digit numbers, but what are you going to end your career with? And if he could hypothetically get 2 more Pro Bowls, 2 more All-Pro teams, and 100 career sacks, then I think he's going to have a pretty good shot at that point. Can he get to that? That's obviously pretty lofty. I think he can hit 100 sacks. Can he get the 2 All-Pros when he didn't get it this year? Got some young guys that are going to be sticking around in Jones and Simmons and Quinnen Williams. It's going to be a tough group to crack. That's probably about what he has to do to really have more comfortable footing to get into the Hall of Fame.
Here's the other argument with it, kind of going back to the whole Hines Ward, the wide receiver position and log jam and more guys, quote unquote guys, if you will, is, how big of a list can you build right now of, let's say, guys that have played in the last 8 years that you could say, oh, that guy's, there's the Aaron Donald, right? In other words, what's that list look like
at the position?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the blessing and the curse.
When you don't conflate is that a word?
Conflate.
When you mix together, what would that word be? Let's just say let's just say watered down with using 4-3 defensive ends when talking about guys like Cameron Heyward,
Yeah, I mean, obviously
true defensive ends versus 3-4 defensive ends.
Right, and that's why they call him a D tackle now, to kind of get lumped in with the interior guys, and that's been
that wasn't an accident of that happening, right?
Oh no, 100% on purpose. Yeah, 100%. Like the first or second year they called him that, he started making a bunch of Pro Bowls and All-Pro teams, and so again didn't make his first Pro Bowl or All-Pro team until he was 28. Just kind of got late in that process, and in part due to the designation, and his production has ticked up in recent years. Again, Aaron Donald's your slam dunk guy, your first bout. No one else is going to compare. But you're right. Who else really is there from this era? I have to go down through a list. But that might bode well for Heyward because he's going to have one of the better resumes. But it's all relative to who else is on the ballot that year.
Right. But I mean, when you do look at it positionally, I think it bodes in his favor from just what we just said.
Sure, but he's still got work to do. I think to answer your question, if he retired today, does he get in? No, I think he's got basically no shot. So he's going to have to really continue to be his typical Cam Heyward self for another 2-3 years to even really kind of get remotely close to, okay, this guy's got a pretty good shot.
I'm sure we've managed to anger some listeners with that conversation there. But anyway, Cameron Blackburn writes in, X versus Z receivers. He said, I've had multiple arguments in the last week with professional verified football writers about the receiver designations. They keep telling me Deontay is a Z and George is an X. Furthermore, AB was a Z and Martavis an X. Any clarity you can provide would be much appreciated. Thank you for your service. Salute emoji. Your friends are wrong, or whoever you're talking about. Deontay is an X and Pickens more the Z. Now, however, George did play some X in college, but primarily as far as especially this, the Deontay overall throughout his career, he's been an X receiver, and AB was an X receiver, and Martavis was a Z. So if you are Cameron, if you're the one arguing that your friends are telling you that Deontay is a Z, you need to school them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, and there's been more mixing and matching, but Deontay was drafted to replace AB to be the next closest thing to Antonio Brown. So they were X receivers. That just designates where you line up on the field. Deontay can be a Z receiver on a play if you put him on the strong side. The X receiver is the backside receiver away from the strength of the formation. The Z receiver is the strong side to the strength of the formation, typically the tight end side. And so that's all it means is the designation of where you align. Now, Deontay most often is the X receiver. Pittsburgh runs a lot of 11 personnel, 3-by-1. And so that puts Deontay as the backside X. Although, again, it's not as cookie cutter as it was in the AB days, because back in the AB days, he would go 3-by-1. You'd force defenses to either shift and rotate coverages to AB and basically declare we're double teaming this guy, or single him up 1v1, and then AB would just win those matchups every single time. So it's a little different today. It's a little bit more multiple, but X and Z is just about where you align. But traditionally, absolutely, Deontay is an X receiver. Pickens more of a Z type receiver.
Right. Chris Lookhart writes in, since it's the offseason, how awesome would it be to have Kenny Pickett on the Big Ben podcast? What do you think that conversation would be like? I would listen to it. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I don't think it'd be a good idea to stack him up back to back here with now that Cameron Heyward's done a podcast, but I don't know, 3, 4, 5 weeks from now or whatnot. I would imagine that'd be one of those must tune in type of shows those two would have.
I'm sorry, who was that? My phone was ringing. I got distracted.
Kenny Pickett being on the Big Ben podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be a good show to have two quarterbacks talk that language with each other. So yeah, I'm sure it'd be good. Maybe they'll make that happen someday.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that happens sometime this offseason. Justin writes in, hey guys, my dad and I were debating what happened with Dick LeBeau after the 1995 Super Bowl loss to the Cowboys. He was listed as the Steelers defensive coordinator, but after the 1995 season, he took a lateral move to become the Bengals defensive coordinator, and a few years later, their head coach. Was he fired or did he leave on his own? He says, Dave, do you recall what happened? Alex and I were still in diapers when this happened. If memory serves me, for starters, I think LeBeau's contract was up at that offseason, and B, I don't think I think there were some differences in some opinion, and I think there were some things written at a time. Is Cowher a little bit too strong on some of these assistant coaches? And I think the actual report was, LeBeau wanted to kind of explore other choices there. So I don't think he was fired. I think it was more along the lines of, deciding after his contract had expired that he wanted to look at other situations, and probably not the best of relationship with maybe Cowher at the time. And he chose to go to Cincinnati.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the situation there well, and haven't done a lot of research on it. So yeah, he had an interesting career. I know he's always remembered for his time as a Steelers DC, the father of the Fire Zone, but he was the head coach of the Bengals for a couple of years, that lateral move that he made. So great player. People kind of forget about what a great player he was for the Lions. So interesting, obviously very interesting life, but even putting the DC part aside, some other interesting kind of footnotes on his football days.
Boy, I'd like to be stuck with him in a room for a couple hours.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Or in an airport or something. Adam Gesk writes in, Alex has said repeatedly that the Steelers don't have a shutdown corner. I'd be interested to understand further what that means. Wallace and Sutton both had a quarterback rating against under 75, as well as Pierre in a much smaller sample size. Ramsey, Terrell, Howard, Diggs, amongst many other athletic and highly touted cornerbacks have all given up quarterback ratings of 97.5 or higher. While it's an imperfect stat, and I think really that's the main thing with trying to throw that stat out there is it is a bit of an imperfect stat depending on who you're facing and all like that. And he says they didn't have to cover the elite guys very often. I do wonder what you'd be willing to give up to get one of those shutdown guys. Would you prefer a Jamel Dean to a Deron Payne, for instance, in that? What do you mean? He wants to know first, what do you mean by shutdown corner?
Yeah, I get the question. There is no black and white answer. It's kind of you know it when you see it. I think to your point that you made on Monday's show was, do you have a guy that you feel comfortable traveling and taking on a number one receiver, Jamar Chase, any top receiver in football, Devontae Adams, you name it, you're comfortable with that guy traveling and matching up with every single snap. And that's quarterback rating, there's value in it. I'll be talking about it when I do my charting here soon. And yes, definitely Sutton, great year, really strong year for him. Levi Wallace, much better the back half of the season. Want to give those guys a ton of credit. But when you compare that to a Ramsey or other names, those guys are always on top receivers. In Pittsburgh, they just play side. And so you don't always necessarily see those guys. And so do you have somebody that you can trust to travel and to lock up and face that guy every single down? I think Sutton's a really good player. I want this guy back. Is he in that upper echelon tier? And it's a small number, and I understand they don't grow on trees; they're hard to find. But I just don't consider Sutton to be in that number one true lockdown type corner category.
Yeah, I agree. But in the same breath, and we've talked about this when we went over to free agents, all. I mean, it's a guy that you really fully expect this team to. He wants to remain here. He's a good fit here. He had a great season. Just look at what else is there. They need to make every effort they have to bring him back and then probably draft another one on top of it.
Right. So we'll keep an eye on it. It's certainly one of the biggest storylines Pittsburgh will have around free agency.
I'll be surprised if they don't re-sign him. And we'll see. Enrique Lopez. Hi, David Alex. First time emailer. First and foremost, great podcast and great content. Well, thanks. What took you so long, Enrique? First time emailer here. My question is, will you guys be doing another roundtable with the rest of the crew to recap the season and predict the future in terms of needs, wants, draft, and free agency opinions? I'd like to hear everyone's take on what the Steelers should do to improve the outcomes next season. Thanks again for all you do. Keep it up. Absolutely, we're going to be doing some of those. It's just a matter of logistically and time and when we can make it happen. Do you remember when the first one of these we did was last? We'll have to look back. I don't remember if we did one prior to the All-Star games last year or not. Alex, do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember. Probably do something after, I assume, whenever everybody's been at the event and interviewed and has some more information. So I'm sure we'll sprinkle them in throughout the off season.
Look, these guys are busy with a lot of homework. Uncle Dave's been getting get them. We got spreadsheets and data galore to help get these guys ready. What do you think about that sheet, Alex? A lot more.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of help lay it out because it's really important for me because, as you know, we're kind of so late to getting on board for the draft process and the Senior Bowl's in 2 weeks. And so I got to kind of get up to speed here really quickly on that. So having kind of good starting points is really helpful for me.
Yeah, it's pretty for, we're not going to share it, but because there's a lot of time and work went in it, but it's a pretty encompassed, with links to bios and stats and obviously, some rankings and those kind of things there. And it's kind of one place access for our people to kind of get around and learn, prior to tape breakdown a lot about some of these guys. But yeah, we'll definitely be having these round tables and more than just a couple of them, I would imagine, as the off season progresses. He says, P.S. Hey, Dave, do you like new metal like Korn and Slipknot? Your intro music sounds a lot like Korn. You got to remember my age here. All that's kind of is, the new. I obviously can listen to it. I'm more older school. I'm more of the traditional hard rock, heavy metal, hair metal type of stuff. Believe it or not, my wife's probably is more into the newer metal. Than I am. She'll be listening to something. I'm thinking, who the heck is that? That's how progressive she is in that stuff. But I'm more old school. I'm more Black Sabbath and Ozzy and more of the older metal and all. Let's see here. What kind of you're all over the map. We've talked about this several times with your musical taste, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of more, I guess, a little bit more new age rock. I was kind of going through Spotify's best of like 2007, so that's, I guess, not super new age, but newer than where you're at. Yeah, some Corn came on. I'm not a big fan of Corn, but I guess Foo Fighters, that kind of stuff is my jam.
All right. Alexander's got a little bit of a longer one here. He says, "Hey guys, sorry for the long email, but want to share a take and get responses with all the recent focus on D-line and cornerback in the upcoming draft. I would like to state my case for why the Steelers should absolutely be targeting offensive line in the early rounds. First, serious concerns surrounding Dotson and Moore. For much of the season, they were 10 penalties NFL, and the eye test confirmed their poor play for most of the year. I would not use their better play in the final weeks as proof they will be solid moving forward due to small sample sizes of success." He says, think Akella Witherspoon. He says, second, while their other three starters on their line are fine, they are not Pro Bowl caliber guys. The Steelers are a run dominant, ball control team, blah, blah, blah. Playoff teams who run heavy with over 500 team carries, such as the Ravens, Cowboys, Eagles, and 49ers, have stars on the line. He says, think Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Trent Williams, Zach Martin, Zeitler, Linderbaum. The list goes on. The Steelers line simply does not compare. We've also seen these past 2 years that it takes time for a line to mesh. You both said that the Steelers offense perfected mediocrity this year. Do you believe, as I do, that Steelers should make an attempt to upgrade this line now, or do you fully believe that this 5 is good enough to compete with the better teams in the league when factoring Kenny and how young the offensive skill guys are? He says, P.S. I'd probably lean toward guard. Alexander, look, once again, I think this team should address the offensive line in the draft at some point, and maybe even with 2 picks. Can you make a good argument that it should be a first round pick at 17th? You get it 17th overall, and kind of historically, you're looking at maybe the top guard in the draft, or like the third best tackle, right? Is it unthinkable that they go? I mean, would I turn my nose up at it? No, I would not. There's a lot, and we talked about wide receiver earlier in the show and all like that. I'll still stand by kind of my thought that obviously depends on who's there and yada yada, but I would see them gravitating more to somewhere in the trenches, like Alex and I've talked about, interior defensive line, offensive line, before I would say a cornerback or safety or something along those lines. It would not, I would not rule out the possibility, and I would not turn my nose up once again if the 17th pick or the 32nd pick, if they stand pat, were to be an offensive lineman, a tackle, or guard. At the very least, they need to infuse some younger offensive linemen into this group, and maybe even 2 of them if they can in this draft.
They do need better depth. There's no question about that. They're not going to be as healthy in 2023 as they were in 2022. In terms of, how do you evaluate this line? It got better. And I know that Dave and I kind of joked about them perfecting being mediocre. That's where they were at last year, not necessarily where they're going to be or where they're going. As this offense grows and stays intact, which it's fully expected to be, they're going to be better for it in 2023. Now, will they be the elite of the elite? Probably not, but just want to recognize that we talk about where they were at. It's going to be different to where they could be, next season. I've been of the same mindset. If you're going to address anything, to me, left guard's the place to start, but it depends on the board and just depends on who's all available. So it's really hard to answer those questions.
It is. But once again, would not be surprised if it needs to be in the trenches. I think first and foremost, that's where they need to look. And I still find myself leaning more towards defensive tackle. Look at what and we'll see what happens with Larry Ogunjobi and, if they do anything else in free agency or whatnot here. But as we've run down the things that are going to happen up front, you've got Wormley's not going to be ready, or if he is, he's just barely going to be ready. And anyway, do you want Chris Wormley out there being a starter for you on defensive line? The answer is probably no, right?
Yeah, ideally before the injury, a really solid rotational guy. Now with the injury, you kind of really question that. And so again, to the question of, you get to build through the trenches, that's Andy Weidl. We've said it before. We'll say it again. Andy Weidl's whole mentality is to build through the trenches and get big, physical, mentally tough dudes. And so I expect Pittsburgh to take that approach, both in free agency and in the draft.
This is where I'm at right now. I really foresee an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, or someone like Jordan Addison potentially being their selection. That's where I'm at in this right now. And I mean, it's July. I mean, it's January 18th, and we all know how things can change and how my opinion might change. But that's where I'm at right now, where I think this team might go.
Yeah, I'm basically with you.
In their first, with their 17th.
Right. I'm basically with you, but like you said, this thing can and will change so much. So it's all kind of moot, I guess, by the time April comes rolling around.
Right. But once again, go back to the defensive line. Wormley, Louder, assuming Wormley comes back, Loudermilk, Alualu is probably not going to be here. We'll see about Ogunjobi. What is DeMarvin Leal? Who else are we, in play there? Montravius Adams. I mean, he's more of a, backup guy. That's glaring to me right now.
Yeah, I think it's Cam Heyward and a bunch of question marks. And for a team that needs to play good run defense in an AFC North that can run the football, for a team that's going to ask a lot out of its D tackles, it can't be Heyward just doing it all.
All right. I think we've hit all of them. Alex, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think we'll come back on Friday and see what the coaching landscape of Pittsburgh and the whole NFL looks like and take it from there.
All right. Almost 50 posts on Steelers Depot yesterday. A lot to read there. And a lot of scouting profiles starting to hit up on the site as well too. Hope you join us on the site. In the meantime, what's your terrible take about today?
It is about the kind of bouncing off your wild card weekend thoughts and takes of don't dive over the goal line with the ball outstretched. The juice is not worth the squeeze is my main idea today.
Isn't that sort of a Bill Belichick no too?
That is my terrible take. It's like you've listened to it already. Yeah. Where his philosophy is don't do that unless it's fourth down, fourth and goal, or the last play of the game. Never extend the ball over the goal line or stretch over the pylon where you risk the whole, fumble touchback aspect.
Right.
You hate the rule. Who cares? It's the rule.
Right. I apologize. And I have not listened to it. So if you got this far, listen to Alex will make it sound a lot more smarter than any of that. But I can't help but think about that was one of the first things that popped through my head. Yep. And every time, and look, there was a couple of nice stretches in some games this week, right? Where not only goal line situations, but guys stretching for the pylon or stretching for the end zone type plays. But every time I see one of those, I keep going back to, man, that's a Bill Belichick no. So
Najee was doing it a lot this year, and it had worked. But then in week 18, he fumbles, and then Tyler Huntley fumbles, and just isn't worth it.
Well, there I go, being a party pooper there. So spoiler alert. Anyway, within all that, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, and look, those donations will get put to use. We send a lot of people out of town to Vegas and Mobile, Alabama. If you'd like to have an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. Follow the directions that way. Alex and I'll be back on Friday. Who knows what we'll be talking about? But in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.